I was engulfed in this white light now, and everything else just disappeared. Because now I'm in this just, again, it's just indescribable, but it felt like I was just instantly in like this massive engulfed white light.
Welcome back to another edition of the Real Spiritual Talk podcast. Today, my guest died and had no heartbeat for 20 minutes. Here to detail that near death experience is Kevin Mohat. Kevin, welcome to the Real Spiritual Talk podcast.
Thanks for having me today, Lamont.
Absolutely no problem at all. Now, Kevin, I understand your near death experience was pretty lengthy in the sense of time 20 minutes. Is that so?
It is a fact, yes.
Wow. You know, most near death experiencers, or many of them at least, they go about a few seconds to a minute or two, but you
No,
sound like
mine was a long time.
you
Yeah,
sound like you had an expansive experience here.
I did.
So before we get into that, first and foremost, I would like to go backwards a little bit before your near death experience and ask, did you have any spiritual or religious beliefs you held prior to
Yeah,
having your near death experience?
yes, I've been a Christian my whole life. Um, I've always had faith, so been blessed many, many times. Several miracles in my world has happened, so I'm very spiritual.
Gotcha. So you
Still a
already had
sinner.
so you are, but you still had a concept of an afterlife.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so why don't we go into what it was that actually triggered the near death experience to occur?
Well, on February 14th, 2022, at noon, I started to play ice hockey. At the time I was 60 years old. I've been playing hockey my whole life, and I'm in really good shape. I don't drink or smoke, and I had been playing with a bunch of 22 to 24-year-old juniors, and I played quite a bit of hockey when I was young, and I was still keeping up. They like to call me Moses until they run into me. Then I'm a tree stump, but I digress. So on Valentine's Day, I started playing around noon, and I had previously had COVID, and I got pretty sick with it, and the shots and all that. So I was just kind of getting back to playing, starting to feel healthy again, starting to get my wind back, and we started playing around noon. I was playing with guys that are about 24 to 30 years old. I was definitely the oldest guy on the ice, and we played for about an hour and 10 minutes, and I was doing well. I was keeping up with my shift, and I paced myself, and I was actually a little bit surprised on how well I was doing. Hadn't been in, with COVID and all that. So about an hour and 10 minutes, about 110, I started to feel like I weighed about 800 pounds. And it was really unusual for me. I don't get tired. My heart rate, as a rule, is about 50. My blood pressure, as a rule, is 95 over 60s. So I'm very healthy. I have no comorbidities. I don't have any kind of, my cholesterol's low. I'm a healthy guy. So I was it came on kind of slow at first. And then I thought maybe this is COVID, just kind of hanging on a little bit. And it got to the part where I could barely move on the ice. And I thought, I got to go. And so I didn't finish the game. And they chirped me off the ice. We'll see you later, Moses. Park the water on your way, that kind of thing. I got into the locker room and I was struggling. I just couldn't understand what was going on with me. I could barely get my skates off. And so I got undressed, got my skates off and everything, and put it in the bag. And I was just heading home. I was going to take a shower and a nap. I was sure it was COVID. It was just kind of coming back and biting me. So put my stuff in my car. I live about a mile, maybe 2 miles from the ice rink. So I got in my car and I drove about a quarter mile to the north, and then I turned right on a street called Warner, and we lived on Warner Road. So I'm about a mile now away from home, and I was heading east on Warner Road, and I was approaching a road called Higley. So at Warner and Higley, there's an intersection there with lights, a left-hand turn lane, and it's a 2-lane road. And so I pulled up two cars in the intersection. I was behind two cars at a yellow light, and last thing I remember was old pickup truck in front of me, and I put my foot on the brake, and I died in my car of a Widowmaker heart attack, full on. And this part, I don't have any recall other than what reports I found out about a year and a half later after I've interviewed everybody. Basically, what appeared to happen was with my foot on the brake, I had this Widowmaker heart attack. What a Widowmaker is your left anterior descending artery is what gives your whole body oxygenated blood. Um, Later, I found out that that artery was 100% blocked. And so when that happens, everything shuts off. It's immediate. That's why they call it a Widowmaker. You die. So I had expired in my car with my foot on the brake. Apparently, I'd slumped kind of in underneath the wheel with my knees, and then I slumped to the right onto my console of my car, and my body put my car in park. And so here I am in park, two cars in, dead. And what happens with the Widowmaker is that your heart goes into what's called a ventricular fibrillation or VFib. So, the heartbeat normally has a rhythm like that. Mine, it just was just jiggling. So you're gone. Your heart is not beating. It's just jiggling. It's like a bowl of jelly, just kind of has vibration to it. So I was in my car. I found out later. I interviewed all my lifesavers in preparation for my book. Not yet, not yet, which is about ready to get published. The first person I was able to speak to after the firemen and the first responders was a woman named Angel. She was behind me in her car behind where I was at in that street with my car in park. And I talked with her. Her name was Angel, believe it or not. And I said, how long was I in my car? Because I didn't know. Nobody knew. She says, well, when she pulled up behind me, she put her foot on the brake and she said that a friend had sent her a video on some social media app or whatever. She said she was sitting there watching this video, waiting for me to go. All right. And I said, well, how long was the video? She said, well, at least 3 or 4 minutes. And I said, do you watch the whole thing? She goes, yeah, I watched the whole video. And then people started honking at her because she wasn't going anywhere and they were driving around the both of us. And so she figures it was right around 3.5, 4 minutes based on this video that she watched the entire thing. And I went back and did a little bit of research. That was likely 4 traffic lights that I sat in my car, just gone. And she felt, I asked her, I said, what caused you to get out of your car? She said that somebody tapped her on the shoulder and said, something's wrong. And so her instincts were just get out of her car and walk around to my driver's side door. And she opened the door, which that's how we figured out I put my car in park because your locks that go up. And she opened my car door, and there I was. She said I was purple and had foam coming out of my mouth, and I had no heartbeat, and I wasn't breathing. And so they buttoned me up and sent me off in the ambulance to the hospital, where I bypassed the ER. Apparently, I went straight to a cath lab, which is where they would go into your arteries and they insert a catheter inside your artery. And I find out later my son worked at that hospital in the ER. And he said that that day he wasn't there, but his friends told him that they had all been given a heads up that I was coming and I was code. And so I went straight to the cath lab, and they had a team waiting for me to go into my arm, my radial arm, the artery there, and they went all the way through my heart, and they could tell by the V-fib rhythm that it was on the left side anterior descending artery. So they went in there and they found a blood clot about 3 inches long in that artery and pushed it out, threw a couple stents in, and they were expecting that I would have serious brain injury at the time. And so they put me under in a coma in a sedation format, and they were going to wait and see what was happening with my brain. So that's the incident. That from reports, this is all I've gathered from reports from my cardiologist, I've got police reports and the fire department reports, and the ambulance reports on the time frames. That's the only way I know. So that in itself, that's the incident. And
That's the incident. And with that, we're for certain that you were indeed clinically dead for at
Oh
least
yeah,
20 minutes.
yeah. I was VFib. So VFib is your heart's not beating. If I were, the thing was I was going home. Had I made it home, my wife, she was gone shopping that day, and had I made it home and had this Widowmaker at my house, I'd be dead because your heart stops beating. It's what happens when that artery is blocked. It shuts off the oxygen to the rest of your body, and your brain says, "Never mind," and blink, it puts you down. And you've probably seen people on TV where they just collapse or they just fall over and they're gone. That's what a Widowmaker is. It's instant. Yeah.
And with that said, while this was going on in the earthly realm, did you have any kind of consciousness while you were clinically dead for these 20 minutes?
All right. So maybe I'll give you a little bit of filler before I get to that. Here on Wednesday, this was a Monday, okay, that I was admitted and I'm in ICU and I'm in this coma. Um, they saw that I was having brainwaves, and that was kind of unusual for them. They were certain I would have an ABI, an anoxic brain injury. So on Wednesday, they woke me back up, and I was lucid. I was answering questions and doing everything, and they couldn't believe it because they knew how long I had been down. So I leave the ICU on Saturday. I walk out of there on Saturday. And my first appointment with the cardiologist was Monday. And so on Monday, my wife was driving. I was pretty beat up, no doubt, beat up and fuzzy, and it was rough. So we went to the cardiologist. He told me all about my heart attack, and I said, okay. So we're on our way home, and this is where it got crazy. She's driving. We're on the same road, driving home, and we actually pull up to that same stoplight, the same location. And I didn't really remember that's where I was. I mean, I was that fuzzy at the time. And I look through her window, her driver's window, and I see this light pole that's in the boulevard. The moment I saw the light pole in the boulevard, I got this indescribable but electric chill. It was just like, right? As soon as I saw this pole. And I had, at the time, I had a monitor on me that was going to shock me if my heart stopped beating again. It's called a Zolavest. So first I thought that was going off. But no, I looked at that pole and it gave me this really creepy electric chill. And I was like, what? I didn't remember exactly this was the spot. Okay. But I had spent about 20 years training law enforcement, and I'd thrown thousands of cops on the ground. And so I was always a public servant that way. And one of the things I always taught was don't give up the fight, you know? And I looked across the street and I see this fire department. I'm like, it's got to be these guys, right? Because they were right across the street. At this point, I had no idea how long I was down for. I didn't have any of that data. I just knew that I'd had a Widowmaker. I ended up in the hospital. And yeah, my heart's damaged. And that's about it. Okay. I didn't understand the time length at all. It wasn't clear to me. So I said to my wife, let's go across the street. I think it's got to be them. I mean, they're right here. I'm alive. That's probably why I'm alive, because they're so close. Duh. So I wanted to go thank them. And so we pulled into the parking lot and I knocked on the door, and a fire captain looked out the window and he saw me, and his eyes were about the size of Pepsi bottles. And he was like, you were dead. And I'm like, not hardly. He goes, no, you were gone. Come on in. And so he invited us into the firehouse, into the kitchen, where I met the young firemen. They're like in their 20s, the firemen, and there was also an assistant chief. And the assistant chief was about ready to retire. I think he did already, but he was in business for 45 years. And we were all talking, and he said, you realize how long you were gone? I said, I had no idea. And he said, you were gone for a minimum of 20 minutes. And I went, whoa, that's a long time. He goes, no, that's unheard of. And he said, we've been in this business a long time. They were talking about me, actually, that they were certain I didn't make it. And here I show up, and I'm talking to him like, da, 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 they're thinking this guy is long gone. So they can't believe that I'm really sitting in their kitchen talking to them. And the assistant chief says, I got to tell you, I've been in this business for 4 decades. And he goes, I've never seen this. I've never watched anybody get up from one of those and live, let alone have the ability to talk about it. He says, what was it like? And up to that point, I was like, I don't know. And I shut my eyes. And Lamont, boom, it was like an IMAX theater. I kid you not. And it gets very emotional from this part because up until this point, I didn't really have any kind of recall, but I'm equating it to looking at that pole and that electric shock that I felt. Don't know, I can't tie it together for sure, but it was very profound. And then I had my eyes shut, and it was seriously like a 3D IMAX theater. I says, well, I'm on top of a pole, a light pole. I'm kind of like stuck to it, like Velcroed. My back is on. I'm not sitting on it really. I'm just on it. And I'm looking straight down. And I told him I saw a bunch of blue people that were on top of what I thought I knew it was me because I saw my shoes. My shoes were moving back and forth. I said, a bunch of blue people were on me. And then I told him, I said, behind me, there's a red fire truck and there's numbers on it. And it said E256. And I said, in front of my car is a red ambulance with the back doors open. And it said on the side M252. I said, across the street, there, I know there's a Keller Williams, there's a real estate agent company. I said, but there were people along the sidewalks in clusters that were watching and just kind of, looking. I said, there was a police car facing towards the east and another one facing towards the north in the southbound lane, blocking traffic. And I could tell it was me because I saw my feet were moving. And I'm looking towards the south, and in way far in the south is a mountain called Santan Mountain. But I could see it. It was a very clear day out, and I described the clearness of the day and everything. And then I said, right next to me and all these blue people, and this is where it got crazy. I said, and I held my fingers up. I said, there's a white envelope right next to me, and they all looked at each other and went, what? I go, yeah, it's a white envelope. I go, what is that? And he said, come with me. So we got up, walked around the corner into the garage of the fire department, where the fire engines and everything are parked. And my wife said, Kevin, look. And there was an engine with E256 on it. I'm like, whoa. And at that point, the fire captain who initially I met at the door, he said, how's your arm? And this is where I found out about this, what they did to my shoulder. And I said, well, this one's artificial. And he goes, no, the other one. And I was like, ow, hurts like a dog. He goes, it ought to, because he pulled out of the engine, the E256 engine, he pulled out his paramedic bag, opened it up, and he pulls out a little green Makita drill. He goes, I drilled you with this. And I'm like, you what? He goes, yeah, Kevin, because your bounce house was totally flat, meaning all my veins, they're not viable because my heart was beating. He goes, I got to get an IV in you. So I found out it's called an IO. I wish I could remember the full name of it, but it's called an IO that they drill into either your shoulder or I've heard that they can put it into your ankle to get to the bone marrow. They drill a hole, and then he throws me a white package like that. And I'm like, what's this? And he goes, turn it over. And the other side was clear, and it had a coiled up plastic tube with a needle on one end and a little screw top on the next. So I said, what is this? He goes, that's what I stick into your arm, and that's what goes to the IV when I hook it up to you. And I'm like, would I know about this? And the whole group is going, hey, no way, no possible way. There's no way you would know about the fire department. You would know where we were at. You were gone, buddy. And I said, how would I know? And they all were just at a complete loss because they had never seen anybody come back and describe before. They didn't tell me anything about it. I mean, I literally described the whole thing, where everybody was at, where everybody was parked, what everybody was facing, what everybody was doing. And they were just in shock. They could not believe that I had this recall. So I went, oh, okay. And I shut my eyes again because I'm crying by now. I mean, I'm really emotional. I'm like, what the heck did I just experience? I couldn't understand it. And so I shut my eyes again, and there it was. And I still have it in me. It's never left me. It's like a video loop that is playing in my brain all the time now. But anyway, I had my eyes shut, and I said, there it is again. And I even went into deeper detail. I started to describe a person that was standing next to my car. Come find out he was the man that actually pulled me out. I described his shirt and what he was wearing. And then I said in my vision, I said, I'm looking south and I'm looking at Santan Mountain. And in our state, we call it a haboob. Okay. It's a dust storm. It's an Arabic word for dust storm, but we call them haboobs. And a haboob is very common here in the summertime. We get these massive walls of dust, big walls, like 500 to 1,000 feet high. And if you ever watch it on the news, it's coming at you. And you literally can look at your watch and say it's going to be 5 minutes and we're going to be covered in dirt. And that's what you know. I said, I'm on this pole and I'm looking towards the south and there's a haboob, but it's massive. It's super high, but it's not dirt. It is this light. It's like a wall of brilliant, brilliant, indescribable light. I can't even describe it. I've often tried to tell people when I'm trying to describe it, it's like, how do you describe the color green to a perfectly blind individual from birth? How do you describe it? It's that hard to try to quantify in an adjective that would adequately describe that light. But it was in this big tall wall and it was coming straight towards me like this, almost as if I could see it moving. And in this whole thing, there was no time. That was the strangest part. There was no sense of time. I was not afraid. I was very, very peaceful. It was very calm, like very peaceful, very calm. I was not afraid at all. I actually didn't have any emotions at all. I didn't feel any emotions. I've been interviewed by several people and a couple of hospitals and a couple of universities, and it's all the same. There's never really any emotion I could put to it. I wasn't sad. I wasn't happy. I wasn't glad. It was timeless. And then I was engulfed in this white light now, and everything else just disappeared. Because now I'm in this just, again, it's indescribable, but it felt like I was just instantly in like this massive engulfed white light, and I'm in it, and I'm looking at my hands, and I could see my hands kind of shining and reflecting. It just felt like I was a beam of this indescribable white light, and it was peaceful, quiet, and no sense of time now. I've got no sense of time. It's just nothing, basically. And in it, I was explaining to them the very first time, as I had my eyes shut, I'm crying by this point. I said, I'm in this light, and I feel maybe a vibration or a frequency, kind of a real low, though, a real low hertz of a frequency, just kind of in me. Okay, just it felt like it was in me, this vibration. And this is where I'm really, I'm just trusting God that that's what it was. But I believe in all my heart it was my mother. It was a vibration. It wasn't a voice that like somebody standing next to me. I didn't see anybody in this light. It wasn't like I had my family in front of me or my past in front of me. I've heard a lot of people say their life went before them and all that. None of that happened. I'm engulfed in this brilliant white light with this frequency. And in this frequency, in this timeless space, again, it was intuitional that it was my mother, but she said, not yet, not yet, 2 times, but in a real low frequency kind of a feeling. Again, it wasn't English coming from her. It was just inside of me that those 2 words were communicated. And then on the second, not yet, again, it was timeless, but it appeared to me that it's this immediate, that I was thrust into pitch black. And I was in just the god awfulest terror. It was an amazing sense of terror that I can't describe. I've had terrifying moments in my life that were very terrifying, but this was way past that. And I don't know why, but it was just pitch black. I felt like I was in a closet with no door. And at the time I was in this pitch black, it felt like I just pushed off the bottom of a dark lake and went and grabbed my air. Okay. And as soon as I grabbed my air, I started to scream my wife's name, Connie, 3 times. Warrior scream, just warrior scream, Connie. I wanted her to come find me. I was searching for her in this just loud warrior voice, 3 times only, and then nothing. I found out later from my cardiologist that when they were going through my radial arm and into that blood clot, um, when they pushed it out and they put the stents in, they hit me with the shock. And when they brought me back, this is from my son. My son said they could hear me in the ER. His friend said, "Dad, you and what's up with your dad?" That they could hear me screaming, "Connie," in the ER, which is down the hall and around the corner, kind of. And everybody in the ER, the report was everybody's going, "Whoa, what's that?" Because they saw me coming in and they heard all the code blue, and everybody was aware that there was a guy in that room that was not going to make it likely. That's kind of what the whole feel was. But then they heard this screaming from me, "Connie, Connie, Connie." Apparently, I had grabbed a nurse when they brought me back. I have a 5th-degree black belt. I've been fighting all my life. Been boxing since I was 7. I've thrown thousands of people on the ground. I used to do it that's what I did for a living for almost 20 years. And instincts probably kicked in, and I got a hold of somebody, and I got them. And my son told me that it took several people in that room to get me pressed down and to get me intubated and to get me to let go of that person. And then that's when they put me down into that sedation. So that's the story. That's it right there.
Wow. Wow. Very, very detailed
Yeah.
information you came back with from the time that you died and your research into what happened to you, all the way into recalling the incident and explaining to these firemen who are standing around listening to your actual near death experience. Now, just going backwards, this started because of a Widowmaker heart attack that you had in your vehicle. Um, you went back to the scene later on, it sounds, and this light pole is what triggered your recall, right? You didn't
Yes.
you didn't you didn't
I
have
I
this
can only equate it to that because that was that bizarre kind of. That's the only way I can. Because in the hospital, I didn't have anything. I didn't really have any kind of recall. I mean, I don't even remember much about the hospital besides a couple of days. Most of that was pretty fuzzy.
and that's not uncommon. There's a lot of near death experiencers who have recalls sometimes years later. Yours was, it sounds like, maybe a few days later.
Yep,
Uh
a week exactly.
yeah, so you had this recall, and what you did recall when you went back to the fire department is that you had what describes or sounds like it can be described as an out of body experience. You are above this light pole,
Yeah, completely.
right? Atop it and looking downwards, detailing everything from both near and far. And not only did you detail this to the firemen, but they also verified your account. Uh, we
Right.
we refer to that as a veridical experience. They
Oh, that's
verify,
interesting.
yes, they
I'm learning. I'm learning right now because this is interesting to me too.
correct. So they verified that you did see what you saw, which would have been an impossibility from where your physical body was, right? So it's almost as if they are verifying your spiritual account without seeing the spirit. So that's why we refer to it as a veridical experience where there's some
Interesting.
evidence behind it because you have a witness that verifies that you did see what you saw. You also stated that there was a wall of light coming towards you. Um, did this light feel like anything?
This has been the most hard. This is the most difficult thing to try to describe. Um, the light itself, it felt like the light was kind of moving. It wasn't. I can't say that it was just like how we look at a mirror and there's a light shining in it. It was sort of um, moving as it's almost like it was kind of like a not fire, but it wasn't solid in its nature. It was a kind of a moving thing. So there seemed to be a motion to it. And as it was coming, it just the second it hit me, I was completely engulfed in it. It was almost like a dust storm would have engulfed me in a dust storm. You're just surrounded in it, and there's no other vision around you. But it was in this light format, and that is the most difficult thing for me to even, and it's haunted me. I'll be honest with you, for quite a long time trying to figure out what in the heck was that. But I can say to you that inside of that lightness, it was just peaceful. I mean, a sense of awesome peace. I mean, I wanted to go back, to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah, you describe it as having no fear, being calm, being peaceful, and you also stated timelessness. There
Yeah,
was no time.
there was no time.
Even though you could probably estimate that you were out for 20 minutes, it probably felt like you were there forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, later I found out time frames. I didn't even know how long this happened to me until I didn't find out until I talked to the fire department how long I was down. And then, it took me about a year before I really decided I was even going to research a book or anything like that. So I went back to the fire about a year later and I got all kinds of police reports and everything else from, and that's kind of backed up, just the time frames, and how many, I didn't know how many CPRs they did on me or anything like that. I was curious as to when the 911 was called, as to when somebody showed up, right? And I was able to extrapolate into how much time I was in my car because I know exactly how long it takes for me to leave the rink and all that.
The last portion of your near death experience, however, was after you were in this light. You said you could detect what sounded like a frequency. And many near death experiencers talk about hearing things. Was this audible or was it? I know you stated inside of you. Did it sound almost telepathic because you said
Yeah,
you
it
believed
wasn't
it?
in my ears.
Right.
It wasn't a voice. Meaning it wasn't like somebody was talking. I could hear words. It was inside of me. It was like a intuition, maybe. I don't know what the word to use, but it was more intuitional than it would be. It was not audible. It wasn't something that somebody said da 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 da. Um, it was this frequency kind of sending that. It was this, the frequency wasn't there the whole time that I was in that light. All right. I was in this light, and again, it was timeless and it was peaceful and calm and wonderful. And then during it, again, with no, I can't put a time frame on it, like how long it lasted, but it was at the very end of it, of the experiences when this frequency showed up, and it was like a low, and it was at the very end that that frequency is what communicated, in me. It's hard to describe that part of it, but it was more intuitional than it wasn't
Yes.
anything I heard.
Yes, yes, that's very common amongst most near-death experiencers. And you said that you believed that this particular frequency was your mother, your deceased mother, I'm
No,
assuming.
delusion. Yes, she's passed. She passed a year earlier.
Yes, and you believed that this you had a feeling that it was your mother who communicated the words not yet to you. And it was here that you were catapulted into darkness,
Right.
claustrophobic darkness, as you stated.
Terrible. It was horrible. Yeah, it was just. It was. I've experienced a lot of crazy things in my world. I worked for quite a long time for the military and that, and I've experienced some terrible things. This was terrifying. It was. It was what I would almost say hellish, terrifying, and that's how scared I was. Yeah.
But it almost sounds like it was just your way to move back into your physical body out of this light because ultimately you woke up afterwards and they heard you wailing, screaming for your
Yeah.
wife's name.
And I found out why I was in darkness. I later on, I've gone through a lot of things since this happened. It's like I just got up and life continued. You know, my book, Not Yet, Not Yet, is called Tomorrow Has Just Begun. In that book, it describes what's happened after that. And one of the things that I think a lot of people I've talked with a lot of people that have experienced somewhat of the similar situations is that mentally, it's it's iconically very different from what people's experiences are. So there's a lot of mental anguish that happens to it. And one of the things I did do is I went to my cardiologist, and he's one of my best friends now. And I shared with him, I go, I'm putting this together, I'm trying to piece everything together, what's happened to me. I go, can you help me with this darkness and this terror, this process that I went through? I told him, I said, it felt like I just pushed off the bottom of the lake and I was out of air, and I went and I gasped and I finally got air. He goes, Kevin, I'll tell you exactly what happened to you. And I'm like, what? He goes, that's when we brought you back. You hadn't been breathing for a good 20 minutes. Okay. and all the blood that was not pumping, the only blood that was pumping was to my brain from the CPR. He said that blood most often leaves your retinas and the eardrums and the things that run those senses. My kidneys failed, lungs needed to be reworked, and all that kind of stuff. He goes, but the CPR that saved your life, and this is why CPR saved my life, by the way, because I was playing ice hockey.
And that's exactly why I was so astounded at the top
Yeah,
of the interview at how long you were
yeah,
clinically
it's
dead
crazy.
for
Yeah.
20 minutes. Now, after this experience, how has the experience itself changed you? Many near death experiencers, for example, describe what they call after effects. They come back with a lack of fear of death because they feel that there is no ending after they come back from this. They may come back with higher precognition levels, premonitions, etc. Did you come back changed in any way, shape, or form?
Very profoundly so. That's all I can say. Profoundly changed. I decided to put it in writing so I could share it with others, and I hope I've shared my story with well over 100,000 people now, online, and just it's been to me a profound experience to watch people go, wow. I've always wondered. I lost a parent. I always wondered what they went through. I lost a child. I always wished I knew what could happen to them. I have cancer. I'm gonna die. What's it gonna feel like? Those are the kind of things that have profoundly affected me. That, quite frankly, when we started the interview with, "Am I a religious person?" I'm not a religious person. Religious people are different than me. I played 10 years guitar in a big box church, and that's a very religious experience. Okay. Uh, I have a personal relationship with that light now. And I have a tremendous amount of faith in it. It's the craziest thing. And interesting enough, um, I have learned to adapt and to change by using prayer. And when I say I'm not a religious person, I've only stepped foot inside of a church twice since this, but I have a running conversation with the Holy Spirit in my body. I just have a running conversation. Prior to this conversation, I had that conversation. I said, "Dear Lord, please put the words into my mouth that directly reflect what is happening and what has happened and what I'm rejoiceful for." I rejoice. In all the problems and all the angst and all the human condition that I write about in my book, I rejoice about it because it's left me feeling appreciative and I'm grateful that I'm alive. No matter what I've gone through, I'm still grateful that I'm alive. And life is difficult for sure. It's still hard and there's still problems, but I'm here. You know, I made my wife a widow for the purpose
Yes.
of today.
Three things I get out of this is there is definitely a lack of fear of death here. You're not afraid. You want it to go back. And I also hear a lot of gratitude for the experience, how it changed your life. And I hear that you're more spiritual rather than religious, which is
Absolutely.
also very common for near death experiencers to come back that way. With that said, why don't you give us the name of this book again, the title, and where we can find it when it's complete?
Absolutely. I'm in the final stages of editing. I've just got a couple things. I've got an editor that's helping me tweak it. We're in a pre-sales right now. The name of the book is called Not Yet, Not Yet. Tomorrow has just begun. So it's going to be available in paperback on Amazon. I'm also going to be doing an audiobook, and it'll be in Kindle. So the book Not Yet, Not Yet. Tomorrow has just begun. You can reach me for pre-sales on an email that I have formulated. It's called Kevin Mohat. That's Mohatt author. Kevin Mohat author at gmail.com. Just bust me an email. Give me your contact information, and when we've got it finally in book form, I'll just email you back and say, here you are. And likely I'll have a special for anybody that does pre-sales. Also on Facebook, Kevin Mohat author on Facebook. If you follow me on that Facebook page, You'll see snippets of the book coming, and there's one been posted already today. I think yesterday we posted one. The prologue was posted on there, but we're probably going to put little bites of the book in there. There's been some pretty funny stuff that's happened. There's been incredibly sad things that have happened. There's been crazy things that have happened. The book itself has been kind of an interesting thing. And I hope the book touches people in their heart. There may be just one part of it that will do it. So the book, not yet, not yet. Tomorrow has just begun. Look for it on Amazon. It's going to be coming out in the spring, likely in February. We're aiming for Easter at the latest, but I'm thinking it'll probably happen around February, March area. So you can look for it there.
Great to hear. Sounds like an expanded pieces of your experiences
Oh, yeah, there's a
are
lot happening. More
located
than
in
we
that
can do in
book.
today's conversation. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, with that said, Kevin, I want to thank you for coming on the Real Spiritual Talk podcast and sharing with us that absolutely fascinating account.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
No problem at all. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Mohat.